right, so today Raid released information on Update 3.0. And Update 3.0 has all kinds of great information in it. We have info about new champs. We have info about the Christmas fusion champ. We have artifacts. Like, there's so much stuff to talk about. So much stuff. Okay, so brand new info. Exclamation mark Doom. If you want to see this link for yourself, exclamation mark Doom. And then that way you can also have this link, and I will make sure that I put this up on YouTube later today. All right. Long-awaited Doom Tower is almost ready to go live. So we're expecting this in December. Okay. So what is that? Maybe like in a couple weeks? So here we go. Doom Tower. And this is basically what it's going to look like. Doom Tower is a new game mode that features 132 stages. It says 108 common floors, 12 boss floors, 12 secret rooms, and you get to fight through it. You have normal and hard difficulties, both of which are going to be repeatable. And the tower resets every 30 days, where your progress, your ranks, and everything kind of gets wiped away, and then you start over again. Now, in a Doom Tower, golden keys and silver keys are added to the game when the Doom Tower goes live, okay? Golden keys are required to access a floor for the first time. Silver keys let you access the secret rooms or replay boss floors you previously completed. Now, I already released a video talking about the first 12 secret rooms, okay? Neither golden nor silver keys can be purchased. There is a limit of 10. And it resets every day. However, if you receive keys as a reward for game activity, they'll be available to you to use before the next reset. Now, the Doom Tower floors follow the classic scheme, so it's saying that your champions fight through 3 rounds of enemies, which is normal. It's kind of like we already do now. Every 10th floor features a boss fight. And bosses will be different, and powers will scale with the difficulty you've chosen and your progress. So for example, they're saying that the boss on floor 110 will be much tougher than the boss you face on floor 10. And that makes sense, right? Hi, Consciously, hello. It says secret rooms will pose an additional challenge as they require specific conditions, such as champions of a specific rarity, faction, or type, which, like I said, I already have a YouTube video of that out. And they've already mentioned things like dwarf only, for example, or certain type of, like, attack type, for example. So they've already talked about that. And they did say that they're going to release a video guide a few days before the update to give us unique insight on the Doom Tower bosses, strengths and weaknesses, and advice on fighting them. So once we get that, again, I will be sharing that, and we will just talk a whole bunch about that too and see what everybody thinks. And here's an example of the boss. Check that out. Look at the design. What do you guys think of that? That looks cool, huh? So I think they did a really, really nice job with how the boss looks. I think that looks fantastic. Now, talking about rewards. We've been talking about this for a while, is there's going to be brand new artifacts. Okay? I know people are excited about this too. So here we are with rewards. Completing a floor for the first time earns you a set reward that cannot be farmed again before the Doom Tower is reset. Beating boss floors reward you with materials for the artifact forge, and each boss will reward materials for specific sets. So here is the first set. This one's called Fatal. And this one you get from the boss, Kuldath the Magma Dragon. It's a 2-piece set. Attack plus 15% and crit rate plus 5% is what this is. This one is called Fatal. Okay? 2 artifacts per set, attack plus 15%, and crit rate plus 5%. The next set is called Untouchable. That's this set. You get this from Borgoth, the Scarab King. And this one is 4 artifacts per set. It's resilience plus 40 and immunity for 2 turns. So that makes me think, because they're adding immunity for 2 turns, it makes me wonder what in the Doom Tower that might be good for. Okay. Next one. is called Affinity Breaker. And this one's obtained from Airgrath, the Nether Spider. Now this is also going to be a 4 artifact per set. 4 artifact per set on this one. And it's crit damage plus 30%. 20% to deal a critical hit instead of a weak hit. So again, this is going to be like another crit one. So this one's called Affinity Breaker. This one I think looks kind of cool design-wise. This one is called Frostbite, and this one's obtained from Sorath, the Frostbiter. And this is a 2 artifact per set. 15% chance to resist freeze. Has a 10% chance to place a freeze debuff on the attacker. The chance increases to 30 to 45 and 20 to 30 respectively, with more artifacts from the set being equipped. And you're gonna kind of see that there seems to be a bit of a freeze pattern going on, because we're gonna talk about some more of these champs that actually do have freeze on them. Okay. Next, we are moving on to new champions. And guys, I gotta tell you, this is probably one of the things I am most excited for on the new content is new champions. So here we go. The first is Thea, the Tomb Angel. Thea, the Tomb Angel. She's gonna be a legendary force, attack type, and she's gonna be for the Knight Revenant faction. Her first ability is Befoulment. Attacks 2 times at random, a 75% chance of placing a Hex debuff for 5 turns. Each crit hit decreases the cooldown of the Not of This World skill by 1 turn, which we'll get to down here. When this is ascended, attacks 2 times at random, 75% chance of placing Hex for 5 turns. It cannot be resisted. So she's gonna be one of the first champs to be able to get in the Doom Tower. Now also keep in mind, the champs we're talking about right now are going to be champion fragments that you get for completing the secret rooms in the Doom Tower. You can only get this reward once per cycle. The fragment refreshes once the Doom Tower resets. So it says to make sure you complete as many secret rooms as possible. And you can only get these champs in the Doom Tower. Alright, Hex Reaper. Attacks all enemies. Damage increases by 50% for each Hex debuff on the enemy team. Stacks up to 300%. Removes all Hex debuffs from all enemies after attacking. And now Not of This World works with her first ability here too, right? Places a perfect Veil buff on this champ for 3 turns. It grants an extra turn. Okay? And her passive is Cruel Angel. Has a 50% chance of placing a True Fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn when an enemy loses 30% or more of their max HP in a single hit. So she seems very, very interesting, and she's the first legendary fragment champ that will be available in the Doom Tower. And yeah, you guys are right, Knight Revenant is definitely getting another boost. So this one is Thea, the Tomb Angel. The next one is Gumlock, Skyhide. He's a legendary force support. So this one is a support champ for orcs. Soulsuck Tendrils. Attacks an enemy. 50% chance of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns. Has a 50% chance of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns on 2 random enemies if this champ has full HP. Fateful Trickster. Attacks 1 enemy. Has a 60% chance of stealing 2 random buffs from the target. Also has a 60% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 50%. Steals 50% of the target's max turn meter instead if this champ has full HP. Wild Surge. Attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. So an AoE decreased defense. The first hit on each target also has a 75% chance of decreasing the turn meter by 10%. The second hit on each target has a 75% chance of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns. Enchanter is the passive. Whenever 4 or more buffs are placed on the enemy team in a single turn, places a shield buff on this champ for equal to 50% of the champ's max HP. So this one is going to be Gumlock Skyhide. The next one is Uras Soul Cage. Now, there was a bit of a change to this one, because what you're going to see here was this champion will be an undead horde. So initially, when they released Uras of the Soul Cage, they said it's going to be Legendary Void HP type champ for Demon Spawn, but that's actually not the case. This champ is going to be going into undead, okay? So we're getting another undead legendary. I know we just had Elegaius, but it looks like we're getting another undead legendary as well too. All right? Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Another undead. So here we go. Jagged Knuckles attacks one enemy. Places a shield buff on this champ equal to 10% of the champ's max HP. The shield value increases by 1% for each poison on the target. Fetid Eruption attacks all enemies. Has a 75% chance of decreasing the turn meter by 15% of enemies under 1 or more poison. Okay. Also has a 75% chance of placing 30% decreased speed for 2 turns on enemies under 2 or more poison debuffs. Has a 75% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn on enemies under 3 or more poison. Now it says here, instantly activates the skill when this champion is revived by Elemental Conjurer. I think Elemental Conjurer is one of the other champs. We're going to get to that shortly, but I think that's why, because I don't see that ability. I think it's a champ. Soul Bounty places a 25% strengthen buff on allies for 2 turns and a 50% ally protection buff on allies for 2 turns. Call of the Cage is a passive. When attacked, has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison on the attacker for 2 turns. Whenever an ally is attacked under a strengthened buff, there's a 50% chance of placing a provoke on the attacker for 1 turn. Increases champion's max HP by 5% whenever an enemy receives damage from poison. Whenever an enemy receives damage from poison placed by this champ also decreases their max HP by 5%. And then there's, you know, there's a little spiel in here about cannot decrease single champ's max HP by a certain amount. So again, here we are with provokes, right? More provoking. So it seems like provoke, like we've been speculating for a while, provoke seems like it's going to be having its place for sure in Doom Tower, okay? And his auras increases ally resistance in all battles by 80. So this is Uras of the Soul Cage. Now we have Royal Archmage, but his name is going to be Archmage Helmet when he comes out. Now this one, I've been seeing a lot of chatter about, so I want to know what you guys think of him, but this is the one I've been hearing the most chatter about this morning. Royal Archmage. He's an epic magic support champion for the Bannerlord faction. Arcane Dynamo. Attacks an enemy, fills this champion's turn meter by 10% and fills the turn meters by 20% if this attack is a crit. Time Slip. Attacks an enemy. Also attacks all other enemies if the first attack is a crit. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a stun. After attacking, decreases the turn meter of each enemy without a stun by 20%. Psychic Guidance. Now check this out. Places a 30% increased speed, 30% increased crit rate, and 30% increased crit damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. Not to mention his passive, Chrono Isolation, makes him immune to turn meter decreasing effects. And he does have a arena speed aura. So he seems really neat. Yeah, Sniper Go, that's what I keep seeing, and I have to agree with that, is this kit seems really good. Again, he seems like he's gonna be one of those epics that technically are like a legendary, right? Because he has such a nice kit to him. He's Doom Tower only. So this is what I understand, guys, is the easier floors are going to give us fragments for epics. And the harder floors should give us fragments for legendaries. Okay? So we have him, and then we also have this guy. It says Infernal Golem, but his name is actually going to be changed to Karl the Scourge. So we actually have this one, and then we have one more as far as epics. So here's Karl the Scourge, epic magic defense type champ for demon spawn, okay? Molten Punch. Attacks an enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a 30% decreased crit rate buff. Pyroclasm. Attacks all enemies, a 20% chance of placing HP burn for 2 turns. The chance of placing the debuff increases by 20% for each alive enemy. Pyretic Release. Attacks all enemies, a 50% chance of increase in the cooldown of all ally skills by 2 turns on enemies under HP burn. Also places a shield buff equal to 20% of this champ's max HP in all allies. And same thing, so this one, this skill instantly activates when this champ is revived by Elemental Conjurer. Now the Elemental Conjurer they're talking about is going to be the next champ we talk about, which has a different name. So that might sound a little confusing, but they're gonna be updating the name in the game too. Fiery Swath is a passive. A 10% chance of placing a fear debuff on an enemy for 1 turn whenever they receive damage from an HP burn debuff placed on themselves. And the aura is increases ally HP in all battles by 25%. Elemental Conjurer right here. So now this one, the name is going to be changing to Ryan the Conjurer, okay? So right now, I guess the placeholder name is Elemental Conjurer, but in the game, when the patch goes live, the name is going to be Ryan the Conjurer, okay? So Epic Force, support type for Dark Elf. Magma Ball, attacks an enemy, has a 50% chance of placing block buff debuff for 2 turns. Sweeping Dismissal, has a 75% chance of removing all buffs from all enemies, and a 75% chance of placing a 25% weakened debuff on all enemies. Master of Summons, revives a dead ally with 50% HP, and fills turn meter by 50%. Also places block debuffs on them for 2 turns. Also revives Infernal Golem, which was Karl the Scourge, and the Soul Cage with 30% HP if we're on the same team and not the target of the skill. Then also fills their turn meter by 30% after reviving. If either Infernal Golem, who's Karl the Scourge, or the Soul Cage are the target of the skill, that champion will revive with 50% HP and 50% turn meter and block debuffs. So what this is saying is, if you have Ryan the Conjurer, and at least like one of these on there or both, he will res a dead champ and he'll res one of these champs as well. So you could kind of get like 2 of them, is what it seems like. Or you could possibly get 3 if they're all dead. But yeah, so Ryan the Conjurer, Karl the Scourge, and Soul Cage all seem like they're supposed to work together, like on the same team is what it seems like. So now, as I said, guys, Ryan the Conjurer, Karl the Scourge, Archmage Helmet, the Soul Cage, Gumlock Skyhide, and Thea the Tomb Angel are only obtainable from Doom Tower. They're only obtainable from champion fragments in Doom Tower. You're not going to be able to get them from shards, okay? And as I also mentioned, it's been told that the legendaries, so we have 3 legendaries, those fragments are supposed to be obtainable from harder stages. And the epics, the 3 epics that we have here, are supposed to be obtainable from the easier stages, okay? All right, so the other thing that they have added is there's going to be placements in Doom Tower ranking, okay? Global and clan. Rankings will be further divided by difficulty, normal or hard. So completing Doom Tower floors rewards ranking points and increases your standing, much like you see in tournaments. When the Doom Tower resets, the game will display a pop-up with the current rankings to highlight the most successful players. Now with this, I mean, I don't know if they're actually going to give rewards for this. It doesn't say if they will, or if it's more of like a, I don't know, like bragging rights, possibly. Maybe it's bragging rights. Who knows? So now we're on to the Christmas Fusion champ. And the Christmas Fusion champ is going to be Pixneal. Here she is, all right? She's a legendary magic support champ for the High Elf faction, okay? Now, looking at her and looking at her abilities, I'm thinking she's gonna be like a High Elf, Frost, Fairy Angel kind of thing, right? We don't exactly know what her design looks like, but this is the information we have for her. And the info we know so far is she's going to be made up of 2 old epics and 2 new epics, okay? 2 old epics, 2 new epics. So here we go. Mistress of Glamours. Attacks an enemy. 30% chance of placing a veil buff on a random ally, but she cannot get the veil herself, okay? Grip of Winter. Places a 60% increased defense buff and a 50% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. Then attacks all enemies under freeze. Places a 25% weakened debuff for 2 turns on all enemies under a freeze debuff. Her kit looks pretty good. I can't wait to see what she looks like because like I said, just based on her picture and what we're reading is I'm expecting her to look like some kind of really pretty, like Frost, Fairy Angel kind of thing too. All right, Icicle Barrage. Attacks 5 times at random. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. Has a 100% chance of placing a freeze debuff on enemies that receive 2 hits. And Frostweaver is her passive, okay? Whenever an enemy places a freeze debuff on an ally, has a 20% chance of stealing the freeze debuff and placing it on this champion instead. A 25% chance of filling the champion's turn meter by 25% every time they receive a freeze. Has a 35% chance of removing any freeze debuff from this champion at the start of every turn. If there's multiple champions in the team with the skill, only 1 will activate. So this is interesting, right? Whenever an enemy places a freeze on an ally, a 20% chance of stealing it. So what do you guys think? Do you think that means Doom Tower? Like, are we thinking there's going to be a boss or something in there that does a freeze, and then that's where she's going to be useful? What do you guys think about that? And then her auras increases ally resistance in all battles by 80. But like I said, what I'm also speculating is, with all of these abilities, like there's a lot of provoke, and then now we have a lot of this, we're already thinking Doom Tower stuff, right? About some of the bosses that this will affect. All right, so that is Pixneal. She is the Christmas Fusion champ, all right? So what that means, if you think you're gonna wanna get her, start stocking up now. Start stocking up on your potions. Start making sure you got some energy. And like I said, we do know so far, unless something changes, because things can change in any moment, but if it's 2 new epics and 2 old epics, that means start hanging on to your rares and your epics and we'll see. Next, your Karl the Scourge. Now there's something very interesting that we'll talk about with him in a minute, okay? Your Karl the Scourge. Legendary Void Champ. Attack type for the Barbarians, all right? Axe of all winter. Not some winter, but of all winter, okay? Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 20% chance of placing a freeze. Ignores shield buffs if there are 1 or more enemies under a freeze debuff. Also ignores block damage if there are 2 or more enemies under freeze. Will also ignore 30% of target's defense if there are 3 or more enemies under freeze. So you want a frozen. Blizzard Rider. Attacks an enemy, a 75% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed for 3 turns, and 75% chance of placing a freeze. Also steals 100% of the target's turn meter and places a 30% increased speed buff. Glaciate? Glaciate? Attacks one enemy 3 times. If the target's under a freeze debuff, removes the debuff after attacking and places it on all enemies except the initial target. Also attacks all enemies except the initial target after the 3rd hit. Okay. And the passive is Lord of Ice. Lord of Ice. Decreases the damage this champion receives by 10% and increases the damage this champion inflicts by 10% if there are 1 or more enemies under a freeze debuff. Increases this champ's speed by 15 and resilience by 50 if there are 2 or more enemies under a freeze debuff. So again, with this guy, it's all about trying to keep him frozen. Okay, all about trying to keep him frozen. Active effect. Places an unkillable buff on this champ for 2 turns whenever there are 3 enemies under a freeze debuff. Now this is interesting. Check this out. Check this out. His aura increases ally attack. His aura increases ally attack in Doom Tower by 43%. So guys, that tells us Doom Tower is going to have its own aura. That's important to know. That's important to know. Doom Tower is not going to really be considered a dungeon. It seems like Doom Tower is going to be considered its own entity. And Doom Tower is going to have its own separate aura. That's interesting, right? Yes, that is brand new. Having a Doom Tower exclusive aura is brand new. Is brand new. Okay? So far we have Karl that has a Doom Tower aura, and none of the other ones I have shared so far have that. So we're gonna have to see how many champs they give us that have a Doom Tower aura exclusive. So next we have Akak the Windarin. Now Akak the Windarin is an epic Force Affinity support for Demon Spawn. Hey, we get another Demon Spawn, guys. So here we go. Devour All Hope. Attacks an enemy, has a 30% chance of decreasing the duration of a random buff if the target's under HP burn. Also has a 30% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 15% if they're under a freeze debuff. Cannibal Mites. Places a block debuff buff on all allies for 1 turn and a 25% strengthen buff on all allies for 2 turns. Frostfire Gale. Attacks all enemies. Has a 70% chance of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn on enemies whose attack is higher than their defense. Has a 70% chance of placing HP burn for 1 turn on enemies whose defense is equal to or higher than their attack. So that's got a bunch of conditions, huh? And then we have Twisted Hunger, which is a passive. Heals all allies by 5% of max HP every time an enemy under HP burn debuff gets a turn. So again, Talking Spider. I see you guys talking Spider. But yeah, so you talk about in Spider, when the little spiderlings get HP burn, it says heal all allies by 5% of max HP every time an enemy under HP burn gets a turn. So every time those little baby spiders that are burning move, everybody gets healed by 5% of max HP. And fills the turn meter of all allies by 10% every time an enemy under a freeze debuff gets a turn. Which is interesting because that goes kind of along with some of the other champs we've been seeing too, right? Or this one. Places a freeze debuff for 1 turn. So very interesting, right? And his auras increases ally defense in all battles by 25%. Okay? So that's this guy. I think this seems really interesting though, especially in Spider, because we've been talking about that, right? So every time little babies move, everybody gets healed. Okay? Now this one! Who wanted the Grinch added to Raid? Because if you wanted the Grinch added to Raid, you are welcome. Here is the Grinch right here, okay? Grunch Killjoy is definitely the Grinch. Look at him. I mean, come on. That is definitely the Grinch. There he is. It is him. Grunch Killjoy, okay? He's an epic force support, and they made him an Ogren. They made him an Ogren. Okay? Mace of Foulness attacks an enemy, has a 40% chance of placing a block buff debuff for 1 turn. Kindle Soulfire attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a bomb debuff that detonates after 1 turn. So he does AoE bombs, right? That's what it looks like. Hex Eater removes all debuffs from all enemies, then places 15% continuous heal buff for 1 turn on each ally for every debuff removed from them. Okay? And Madcap is his passive. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 10% whenever a bomb detonates on an enemy. And his auras increases ally defense in faction wars by 30%. So this guy's an epic. And yeah, he increases ally defense in faction wars by 30%. He does look like a good epic, right? I'm impressed because we have a couple of them that look like good epics that they did a good job with. So he seems like he'll be a good epic, and he's for Ogren too. So he'll also be with Ogren, okay? So those are the new champs, okay? New champs. Which champ do you guys like the best? I would love to know your feedback. I would love to know which champ you are the most excited for and which one you like the best. So far, I think he's cool. He's cool. All right, Grunch. Now, here's the thing too. Remember we were talking about Pixneal. If indeed you end up needing 2 new epics and 2 old epics, does that mean ACAC and Grunch are the 2 you're gonna need to fuse the Christmas Legendary? We're gonna have to see if that's the case. So far, I like Pixneal. I like the Grunch. Karl seems pretty cool. And I also really like him. Archmage Helmut. For sure. I feel like he's going to be on most people's wanted list, right? Because of this, the Psychic Guidance. Place a 30% increased speed, 30% increased crit, and 30% crit damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. That's insane. And it's got a 5-turn cooldown. And can we book that down even better? Possibly. But yeah, he seems really cool. He seems really, really cool.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed our video, you can catch us live on twitch.tv/LeilaFoxNation 4 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come on by and be part of our community, and we'll see you there.